I thought at first it was just someone who looked like her. There are a lot of tall, brown-haired ladies with great asses walking the earth, and if this one moved the way I remembered Mary moving, well, that could be a coincidence. As I looked at her more closely, I realized it wasn't a coincidence. Mary was dancing slowly, hip to hip and cheek to cheek, with a tall blonde guy dressed in a blue pullover and blue slacks. He had to be my height, or a little taller, from the way that Mary fit against him. They were moving slower than they had to. The song was Sarah McLachlan's I Will Remember You, for the lovers, as O'Brien's DJ termed it. The song is slow, but they were practically statues, swaying rhythmically to the tune. I noticed he had his hand on her ass, and she was rubbing her thigh against his. What the hell? She was supposed to be in San Francisco, or New York, or any place but here. This was MY Town now that she had thrown me away and fled to a better life elsewhere. I knew it was stupid. We were divorced, long divorced. She had the right to be with anyone she wanted, to do whatever she wanted, wherever she wanted. You'd think, though, she'd have the decency not to flaunt herself in front of me. I gently tapped my forehead against my table. The woman made me stupid. She could have no idea that I would show up at O'Brien's on a busy Friday night. In any case, she had told me that she'd had other men since leaving me and Richard Kelly. I had no claim, no reason to even be watching her. I tore my eyes away from her and started in on another icehouse draft, then pulled out my cell and punched in a number I hadn't called in a while. I'm only answering this because I'm curious as hell, Hugh. You haven't called me in a long time. I thought you'd moved on to someone more age-appropriate. And I thought you'd have met some nice young man and gotten married by this time, not be accepting calls from old boyfriends. Huh, old booty call bed partners, you mean? Old bed partners. I could sense her grin across the ether. Why would you be that mean? Maybe because I get mean when a guy makes it clear he's only after my pee and drops me when he gets tired of that. He would be a really bad guy, somebody who would do that. We don't have anybody like that around here. You know, I stopped calling because you were just too much woman for me. Because you got bored with me outside of bed, you mean? Because we missed each other by a generation, Brittany. Believe me, there have been lots of times when I wished you were either 20 years older, or I was 20 years younger, and that's no lie. You should have been a security salesman, Hugh. You could sell ice to the Eskimos, as they used to say. So, why are you calling me tonight? You couldn't be desperate enough to try to talk me into giving you another taste, could you? I'm sitting here at O'Brien's on the west side with some friends and I'm alone. There's good music, the booze is flowing, and I got to thinking about you. We never did much dancing, you know? We did plenty of horizontal dancing. You weren't too bad for an old fart. Be still, my heart. I know you've got to be busy, but if you weren't too tied down, I thought you might bop over here and I'd buy you a few drinks. A little change of pace for you if you're not busy. Actually, I'm sitting at a table at Pelican's right now. My date want to get me another drink. He's hoping he's going to get me drunk enough to spread my legs. I was getting ready to bail on him. Anyway, boring. So, actually, your suggestion sounds pretty good. I'll grab a cab and be over in 30. I know you can handle it yourself, but since this is sort of a date, call me when you get here and I'll come out and pay the tab. Oh, and how are you dressed? A long silence then. My God. You really must be horny tonight. I'm in something tight and sheer and see-through and silver and gold. Does it show a lot of skin? Yes. Oh heck, now I am pissed. I have some pride, Hugh. I'm not going to let you use me to get some B you're really interested in jealous. It's not yeah, I guess it is, but it's for a good cause. I'll explain when I see you. It's somebody who needs to be eating her heart out tonight. I want you to look as hot and as humanly possible. It's not okay. I'll be there. I want to see the bee who ruined you for everybody else. My cell phone rang 2 icehouses later. I was moving fluidly, but was still fairly sober. Sober enough, anyway. When I walked out and Brittany wrapped herself around me, I couldn't help remembering some of those sessions on her bed. Maybe she had learned how to hold an interesting conversation after S by now. The cabbie gave me an envious glance and said, "You ever decide to bottle and sell whatever you got that attracts women like that, let me know and I'll buy a case." I leaned over and whispered in his ear along with the $100 I deposited in his hand. "It's called money. Large amounts of it. He just shook his head and pulled away. I turned back to her, admiring her large chest, which were almost on the verge of falling out of her low-cut top. The top was low enough. If there's anything hotter than big chest about to pop out of a woman's dress, I've never found it. "Put your tongue back in, darling," she said, running her hand quickly over my D, which began to get hard at light speed. "Will this do?" she asked with a grin. "More than adequate, Brittany. More than adequate." She grabbed my hand. "Let's go torment the bee." We walked back in and straight onto the floor. There was a faster song playing now, but not out of my range, and we moved around to it. Gail and G were out on the floor. Gail took one look at me and burst out into the widest smile. G just gave me the thumbs up. We'd been out there about 10 minutes, 2 songs, when I happened to glance to my left. There, not 10 feet away, was the brown-haired heartbreaker and her tall blonde ass grabber. She was facing me, her companion facing away from me. Our eyes locked and I knew she had already noticed me. I looked away, pulled Brittany to me, and put a lip lock on her that should have scoured the enamel from her brilliant white teeth. She tried to climb into me while I was doing it, and one large chest popped free while she was enthusiastically rubbing it all over me. We got a little smattering of applause for the exhibition. When I looked back at Mary, she was just staring at me, no emotion on her face that I could read. Her date gave me a decidedly unfriendly look, but at that point, I would have welcomed him starting something. She saw the expression on his face, pulled him down to her, and tried to swallow his tonsils. When she finished, she looked straight at me and ran her tongue over those lips I remembered so well. It was as if she wanted to lick the taste of him off to savor, and she as good as said with her eyes, "So there, you son of a b. See if I care." I was determined I was going to prove I didn't care either, so I went back to concentrating on Brittany. We stayed out on the floor another 10 minutes before walking away, without a backward glance, to our table, where the rest of our party had already returned. Gail extended her hand to Brittany and said, "Brittany, haven't seen you in months. What are you doing slumming in a place like this?" Brittany smiled at her, undressing G with her eyes as she did so. The sheer aura of sexuality given off by the two blondes had to have C getting hard in all directions around us. I just got an interesting invitation to see how the other half parties. I've never been in here before. This is fun. It is bracing, invigorating. I understand you've been out with Hugh before. Yes, we had some fun, until he decided that I was too boring to be worth F. His standards are too high for somebody like me. "I love boring," came a call from a nearby table, followed by a lot of laughter. Gail stood and said, "I've had too many drinks and I've really got to pee. Come with me, you two Chauvin. Let's exchange a little gossip." Brittany turned to me and planted another kiss that covered my entire face before letting me go and saying, "Now, don't run out of here on another banking emergency while I'm in the ladies' room." Then the three of them left us males at the table. Bobby leaned back in his chair and said, with a lazy grin, "Life is good. Life is good." "Sometimes I think it is, and then again," said G. "Don't think too much," Percy said, kissing his friend on the side of his face. They held hands like young lovers, though Percy would never see 45 again. "You're here and then you die. Just enjoy what you've got, while you've got it, friend. I see you're trolling the schoolyards now." "Hello, Mary," Percy said, looking behind me. Bobby sat up a little straighter and said, more coolly, "Hello, Mary." Both of them had known her for nearly 20 years. I turned my head and saw her standing behind me, an expressionless stare on her beautiful face. "She's 29. Not that it's any of your business. What the hell are you doing here?" "The last I heard, it was a free country, Hugh. Are you going to tell me now where I can go to get a drink and do a little dancing?" "No. You can go anywhere you want to drink and dance and whatever. I have a pretty good idea what you're going to wind up doing with your friend. You were practically doing it on the dance floor anyway. I meant, what are you doing back in Jacksonville? I thought you wanted to stay as far away as possible from your old haunts. I'm probably going to be doing the same thing you're going to be doing, and at least I'll be doing it with a grown-up." She looked at Bobby and Percy, and if I didn't know better, I'd have sworn she was embarrassed. "For your information, I'm back in Jacksonville because this is my home. I've lived here for nearly 35 years. My friends are here. I know the people at McDaniel's here in Jacksonville. I'm tired of living in exile. Well, don't let me stand in your way, Mary. Welcome back, but don't expect any housewarming gifts from me. Oh, and Brittany, that's the blonde, is all grown up, and she is better in bed than she looks, hard as that may be to believe. Oh, I have no doubt she is a hot young thing. I'm just wondering why she's with you. I just stared at her and felt the weight of Bobby and Percy's gaze on me. She didn't know enough to realize what had happened, but they did. I felt their pity. I pushed myself away from the table and stood. I'm walking away now, Mary. You've managed to ruin a good night out, the same way you ruined our marriage and my life. Don't say another word before I get away from here, because I'm not going to be responsible for what I say or do if you open that lying, cheating mouth again. I made it outside on autopilot, not aware of who I passed or what I saw. It felt like she had jammed a sharp blade through my heart. I leaned back against the plate glass front of O'Brien's and took deep breaths of the cold November air. The miserable bee. With 7 words, she dredged up every bit of pain, anguish, and doubt in my manhood that I'd lived with for 2 years, since another man effortlessly took my wife away from me. The woman who'd known me the best, who had loved me the most, had chosen to ess another man's, had wanted him, not me, between her legs. How do you answer that? No matter what we say, a man's worth, his sense of himself as a man, doesn't come from within. It comes from the women in your life, the woman in your life. Show me a man whose prowess and abilities in bed are scorned, laughed at, rejected by the women he's been in bed with, and I'll show you a man who's had his balls cut off. You can tell yourself as much as you want that their rejection doesn't mean you are less of a man, but you're lying. You won't feel like a man again until you find yourself between of another woman, one who treats you like a man. I'm sorry, Hugh. Go away. Hugh, I didn't mean dash. You meant every damned word of it. I thought it was bad when you ran away, but now you're back. I wish you'd go away again. She stepped in front of me. I wasn't going to close my eyes and try to hide from her. I was trying to hurt you. That girl is so young, so beautiful, and I'm old. My chest are sagging and my ass is starting to droop and I'm getting wrinkles in my face. I am so damn jealous of her that I could spit. Mary, go away, please. Just leave me alone. I'll go away, Hugh. I never meant to hurt you, to drag up old memories. I don't know why. I have no claim on you. I knew what you were doing, but when I saw her all over you, I just saw red. I was so jealous I had to stop myself from coming over and getting into a hair-pulling spat with your little playmate. I looked at her standing in the night in front of me, and I found myself seeing her body under those clothes. I had known every inch of it. I had kissed every inch of it, even knowing what she'd done, even remembering that day when she had told me about Richard Kelly. I couldn't help myself from wanting her still. You're right, Mary. You have no claim. You gave it up. You gave me up. You put me through hell for nearly 3 years because you wanted another man's. I would have died for you. Do you know that? No exaggeration. I would have died for you. So this is the bee. Brittany was there, slipping next to me and putting her arm around my waist. She looked like the dictionary definition of S. She looked Mary in the eye. They were both tall women. You're Mary, the famous Mary. What the hell did he see in you? You're just a flat-chested, wrinkly old bee and stupid to boot. Mary didn't say anything. She just stared back at her as people streamed by us in and out of O'Brien's. How do you get that stupid, lady? He is a good-looking man and way past his prime, but he still hits it pretty good in bed. You have any idea how many women would kill to have a man who looks like that, rich and successful with his balls still working, loving them when they get as old as you? And he does love you, the idiot. I know, she said softly. Take good care of him. He deserves the best. He deserves better than I gave him. She turned and walked away. I looked at Brittany, and I didn't have to say a word. I know you're going to go after her. Like I said, an idiot. Just I hope someday, some guy loves me that way. She walked back toward the entrance to O'Brien's as I caught up with Mary halfway down the block. Do you even have a car down here? Didn't you come with the guy you were with? Yeah, I was just going to wait until you went back in, then call Harry, the guy I'm with, and tell him I was calling a cab and going home. I grabbed her shoulders and stopped her, then turned her around. The tears were ruining her makeup. I dabbed at her face with my handkerchief. I'm sorry for what she said, Mary. You're not old and wrinkled and flat-chested. You're still hotter than hell, and probably always will be. I still don't understand how you've managed to stay 45 while I got old. When you looked at me at Brandy's wedding, I knew that's who you were seeing, Hugh. When that blonde was standing there, I knew you didn't see how old and wrinkled I've become. I'm not ready for a nursing home, but I look like a hag compared to her, and you don't see it. She reached out and rubbed her finger over the side of my mouth, and it came back red. I realized I was still bleeding a little from a lucky shot one of the cowboys had gotten in. That's what hurts the most, Hugh. Even now, you don't see me as I am. You see the girl I was in college, and you always would have if I hadn't gone with Richard. I had the best husband, the best father, the best man in the world, and I threw you away. Go back inside, Hugh, with your blonde and Gail and your friends. Go back to your life and let me go back to mine. I'll be all right. The next day, I walked into Gail's office without going through the secretary. I don't believe in coincidences, Gail. You told her I was going to be there. Nobody else would. Why? She had vanished when I had gone back inside O'Brien's. I assumed she had gone home with G, since both of them were gone when I went back inside, so I hadn't been able to accuse her in hot blood. Now I was just pissed and curious. She looked at me without embarrassment. Yes, I knew she was back, has been for a couple of weeks. We've talked a few times, and I went out to dinner with her at Benny's the other night. And you didn't think to tell me that she was back in Jacksonville, or that she was going to ambush me at O'Brien's? You want me giving her daily reports on what you've been up to and your actions? It's not the same. You've worked for me and been my friend for more than 20 years. Mary and I have gossiped and shopped and been friends for more than 20 years. I know she screwed up and hurt you, and I was royally pissed at her for a long time, but she's still my friend. So why did you tell her we were going to be at O'Brien's? She had asked me to tell her when we went out. Why? She gave me that female look. You're not stupid, Hugh. That makes no sense. She fell into another man's bed, F him, and kept it a secret from you. She made a mistake and let her P think for her for 6 months. But remember, you let your D do your thinking for months, while you were going right up to the brink of F other women too. Yes, you stopped just short and you never stopped loving her, but I don't think she ever stopped loving you either. I don't believe it, but even if I did, it doesn't change anything. It changes everything. She's trying to find a way back to you. She thought you'd see her at O'Brien's with another man, get jealous and approach them, then she'd have a chance to talk to you. It just didn't work out that way. What if I don't want her back? Then, I guess you'll go on living the same wonderful life you've enjoyed for the past 3 years. I just stared at her for a few moments. We had always been on the same page, except for the period when she had dumped Robert Sandler for that a whole Cameron, but I hadn't interfered because it had been her life. I don't give a damn what you do with Mary, be her friend, but it has nothing to do with me. If she listens to you, tell her I will never forgive or forget what she did to me. We have our kids and grandkids, and I can be polite, but it will never go beyond that. I almost called Brittany the next weekend, but something stopped me. We had never been, serious. A good romp, hell, a good F in her beachfront condo would do us both good. At least it would do me a lot of good, yet I couldn't make myself call her. What had changed? When I figured it out, I still didn't understand why, and about what. I felt guilty. I wouldn't be using her. If anything, we'd be using each other. I'd never promised Brittany anything, and there was nothing I could promise her. So how could I possibly be cheating her of something? When I figured that part out, I felt even worse. I had somehow grown fond of this 29-year-old buxom, boring, brilliant young woman who just liked F. Yet, because I liked her, I couldn't treat her like a simple F toy. Well, I told myself, I'll just go through my new and improved little black book, where I'd accumulated names for 3 years. There were a few hotties and a lot more women closer to my age who were friends or friends with benefits. I went on a few dates in December, but it was the last one, in the middle of December, that finally showed me the handwriting on the wall. She was 51, blonde, and a little heavier than she had been 20 years before. She was fighting an inferiority complex her whole husband had implanted within her before leaving for a 25-year-old secretary, but she had really big chest. She was also losing inhibitions after discovering that she loved it, after never having tried it before. After our second night together, when she'd had 7 finishings, she had told me she'd always be available anytime with 30 minutes notice. The problem really was with me, and I knew now what the root of the problem was. Unfortunately, knowing what the problem was and overcoming it were two completely different things. On Christmas Eve, I was in New York. Since we were a family again, Peter and Nicole had decided they'd try to have alternating Christmas get-togethers and, for at least a couple of years, it would be held in New York because of Nicole's medical problems. Mary was there when I walked into their condo. I went over to give Nicole a hug. She still couldn't move well, but she seemed, mentally, to be the old Nicole, and that was all the Christmas present I'd ever want. I hugged everybody and, when it became awkward, went over to Mary to touch her shoulder and give her an air kiss. We had a Christmas feast that was partially catered and partially cooked by Marlena, who had flown in ahead of Peter to help with the preparations. Then the proud parents let Austin and Calabria open 2 presents apiece, with the promise of a real Christmas the next morning. Everybody had said their goodnights by midnight and retired to the main or guest bedroom. There were 4 bedrooms, including one used by Austin. We had been told that, for the few nights we were there, the children would sleep in their parents' bedrooms, meaning Mary and I would have our own bedrooms. I was staring out of the window at the New York nightscape. I loved Jacksonville, but there was something magnetic and irresistible about New York City at night. Mary came up to stand beside me. "Gail told me she told you." "Yeah. I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. I didn't say anything. I know I hurt you. I know you'll probably never forgive me. We'll never be the way we were, but I just want to be back in your life. No rings, no titles. I just want to be back." I looked at her with real curiosity. "Why?" "Because I loved you for a lot of years. Even after I betrayed you, I never really stopped loving you. I had hoped I could. I tried. Richard, we were good in bed. I won't lie because you wouldn't believe me, but I never loved him, not like I loved you. I had men after him, hoping I'd find somebody who would free me of you, but I never did. I finally figured out it was never going to happen. So, since there isn't and won't be anyone who makes me feel the way you did, I had the choice of living my life alone and miserable, or trying to crawl back into your life. Why shouldn't I let you enjoy the feelings I've had for the last 3 years? Short of killing you, there's no other way I can hurt you the way you need to be hurt." She looked up at me, and there was a calm assurance on her face. She thought she had the answers. "Because you're still in love with me. I knew it the day I told you about Richard. I knew it at Brandy's wedding. I knew it that night outside O'Brien's. I don't know why, but you are. Gail knows it too. Anyone who knows you knows it." I looked at her face and body, and I ached for what I could never have again. "You're right, Mary. I am still in love with you. So in love that the other night I couldn't keep with a perfectly hot woman, simply because I knew you were back in my town. You may now screw up my life the way you did my emotional life for the past 3 years, but being in love is not enough. A man has to have his pride. I can't go around lapping up other men's leftovers simply because you might make me happy. I can't forget and forgive that you lied to me for 6 months. If you'd come to me and told me you'd fallen in love or lust with another man, it would have hurt, but I think I could have lived with that. At least you would have been honest. You'd have shown me respect, instead of which you made me a fool. I can imagine what you said with him while you were, and I was calling you, or going about my business believing you were still my wife. I see the 2 of you laughing at me in bed. I can only imagine how amusing it must have been when I was doing my best to F you, and you were thinking in your head how much better Richard Kelly's felt." I turned away from her to look out the window. "The bottom line, Mary, is that I trusted you. I was loyal to you in the most important ways. You know how important loyalty is to me, in my personal and business life, yet you betrayed me. There is no room in my life for you anymore." I left her staring out at the city lights. New Year's Eve, Thursday, December 31st. Even though banks were closed, Gail and her top staff had met during the day to get a running start on. I had called Nicole and Peter during the day. Both of them had pumped me for information about their mother and I. Knowing now that we were both back in the same city, I had given them both the same answer. I hadn't even seen their mother in the month since our meeting at O'Brien's, except for Thanksgiving with them. I didn't tell them what had happened that night in Nicole's condo, and I gathered their mother hadn't either. Neither of us had called the other before or after Christmas. We just lived in the same city. Gail had reserved a large room at Pelican's for a private party. A chauffeured limo, one of a fleet hired by Gail, picked me up at my condo at 7 p.m. and dropped me at the door. When I walked into the party room, I had no idea whether Mary would show up, either solo or with a date. I had thought about inviting someone, even, for a little while, Brittany, but something inside me rebelled at that. I knew she liked me, God only knows why, but she did. How could I play on that and take the chance of it growing into something more when I already knew that Mary had spoiled me for other women? No, there could be no good ending to any relationship between Brittany and myself. I remembered what Mary had told me about Elaine coming to her. I had never meant for her to fall in love with me. I was only making myself feel better as a man by proving that a woman a little more than half my age could be excited by my flirting. Maybe it was just a midlife crisis, but who the hell ever knows that when they're going through it? I just knew I felt alive when I was with her, when I saw the look on her face as I walked into her office. When I was with her, I could forget that Mary existed, that I had been married for more than half my life, that there would never be the excitement of that first time again, that I would never be young again. As long as I didn't F her, it wasn't real, it didn't count. I know that is crazy. Maybe that's why they call it middle-aged crazy. It was all just fantasies, that's all it was. But if Mary was telling the truth I'd never known for all those years, Elaine hadn't realized it was all just a middle-aged man's fantasy. She had thought it was real. That's why she had never called me again after that phone call to her telling her I couldn't go forward. That was why she hadn't been in her office the next time I'd walked by, and she'd accepted a transfer to a branch in Atlanta, but I'd never looked too closely into her disappearance. It was more comfortable after she'd left. I never had to worry about her going to Mary. In the days after Mary had told me about her meeting with Elaine, I wondered why Mary had never said anything, but really I knew. There are things you can live with, as long as you don't have to admit that you know them. If she was ignorant of my actions, if she didn't know what had happened, she didn't have to do anything about them. If she had confronted me, what could I have said in my defense? I'm afraid of getting old, or you're not enough for me anymore. Both of those would have gone over like lead balloons. Would she have had to divorce me, or separate from me to protect her pride? Or would she had come to me and said, "What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. I'm going to F other men, and you'll never know anything about it"? Would I have been able to accept that, or would the suspicions, once planted, have poisoned our marriage beyond any hope of salvage? It would have been my fault, but could I have withstood the torment of wondering, every time she left, whether another man would be between her legs in strange beds? No, her silence had saved our marriage, had given us a good 10 years after I had destroyed it without even knowing it. Now I couldn't make myself forget what I knew, root out the images of her cheating. So I knew and she knew. What in the hell was I going to do about anything? So I went to Pelican's alone on New Year's Eve, the one time in the year when you should always be with someone, even if only for the length of one kiss to symbolize the death of the old and the birth of the new. I stood at the entrance, looking around for someone I knew. I saw people I knew, mostly by face rather than by name. There were clients, customers, bank staff, and business people from around the state. Gail walked over to me as I looked around. She was wearing something low-cut, translucent and crystalline, embroidered with what looked like real gems. She looked literally like $1,000,000, but her chest, skin, and blue eyes put the rubies and diamonds in the shade. It was ironic. If there was any one woman on the face of the earth who could have had a man to love and be happy with, it should have been the woman in front of me. She had everything, yet she had screwed her life up. Some of her lowest-level employees probably had happier personal lives. There had to be a moral there somewhere. Here by yourself, Hugh? Why no date? Don't really know, to be honest. I just didn't feel like it. I might have a couple of drinks, stay long enough to see the new year in, and then go home. I'm getting a little old for New Year's blowouts. That's okay. I'm here without a date myself. I think one might show up. If not, maybe you can give me a kiss at midnight? I'd be honored, Gail. So I met, mingled, and talked pleasantly with ladies who I could have if I'd shown even a little interest. I exchanged talk about politics and the Jaguars with husbands and boyfriends who wouldn't have been happy with me if they could have read my mind. I danced several times with Coffee, who was there with the young attorney named Greg I'd met long ago at Pelican's that first night with Brittany. During one dance, I noticed the look she was giving him and said, "You finally getting serious about a man?" I get the impression he might have been serious about you for a long time. She smiled at me. "He's in a hole, but he grows on you." Why did you think he was interested in me? Just something he said to me one time. During a break, I grabbed a glass of champagne and was walking up to Gail as she stood talking to Hank Clark, the head of a local boutique PR firm who did some good work for us. His tall, dark-haired wife Patricia, who was almost too sexy to be allowed out by herself, stood with them. As I approached them, Patricia turned and smiled at me. It was a friendly smile. During the time that I had gone a little crazy, she was one of the few women, and the hottest, that I had never even tried to play with. I had stopped myself, even though she was very willing at the time, because I had known instinctively that she was a marriage killer. Before I reached Gail, a familiar face came between us and I found myself taking his hand. "Hello, Hugh. You're looking well preserved." Then the grin took the sting out of his words as he added, "Hell, you're looking better than me. How do you do it? A deal with the devil? Good clean living, Robert. You're looking good, prosperous. A little birdie told me you'd struck it rich." Robert Sandler was looking good. A hell of a lot better than he'd looked the last time I'd seen him, in a hospital bed. As his presence registered with Gail, who had been talking to Hank Clark, she stiffened, then slowly turned to stare at her ex. "How the hell did you get in here? You're slipping in your old age, Gail. You forgot to put my name on the keep out at all costs list. Only because I thought that, finally, you would get it through your head that I never wanted to see you again. Still holding a grudge? Why are you here, Robert? Speak quickly, before security gets here to toss your ass out onto the street." He stood there, dressed a lot more stylishly than I remembered him in his school teacher outfits. His eyes ran up and down her gem-encrusted dress and the body it contained, then smiled. I could see her temperature rising. "It's been 6 years, Gail. I thought we could have one dance for old time's sake. I don't want a last dance or a last anything else with you, Robert. You've already rubbed in your newfound wealth with your little big-boobed playmate on the Bon Chance. I know you really enjoyed that. We have nothing to say to each other." He grinned. "Maybe I rubbed it in a little too nastily, Gail, but honestly, you deserved it. You remember the last time you left me, in that hospital bed, unable to move because your whole boyfriend and his friends broke my neck? Some guys would hold a grudge over something like that, but I don't." He stretched his hand out to her. "One last dance, Gail. I'm relocating to Los Angeles in a few days, for business and personal reasons. With your little, or not so little bimbo?" "Yes, Sydney is coming with me. She's not a bimbo. She's a sweet, very intelligent woman. The funny thing is, I think you two would have been friends, under other circumstances." "No, we're done." He kept his hand extended. "I loved you, Gail, and I know you loved me once upon a time. Come on, one last dance, for two people who almost made it. If for no other reason, for your grandfather. You know he always liked me, even though he never thought we'd make it." She looked at him, and her eyes glistened. "You know this is such a bad idea. We were always a bad idea, but it never stopped us before." She took his hand, and they stepped onto the dance floor. Hank Clark, who knew their story, looked at them as they danced, then glanced back at Patricia and reached for her hand. She took it and gave him the kind of smile she had never given me, even when she was trying to work her wiles on me. You know those are two people who should, but probably never will, be together. Patricia looked at her husband. "You never can tell, Hank. Look at us. What were the odds?" "Sometimes people beat the odds," came from behind me. I turned to look at Mary. Despite the chilly weather, she wore the light, summery creation of sheer fabric and embroidered flowers she had worn to Brandy's New York wedding, under a jacket. "Hello, Mary." "Hello, Hugh. Where's your date?" "Flying solo tonight, probably make an early night of it." "You?" "The same. I really came to see if there was any way you'd put your arms around me and forget the past for one night." "You can never forget the past, Mary. You might be able to live with it, maybe even get beyond it, but you can't ever really forget it." "Then why don't you see if you can get beyond it for one night, just a few hours, and then I won't bother you again?" "You keep making that promise, but you keep coming back. You don't keep your promises, not even the really big ones." She stared at me. I seem to remember you had a little trouble with that too. Okay, so neither one of us was perfect. What good will it do for us to share a night? It won't ever happen again. Do you have to have a reason to want to hold someone? She held her arms out to me, and we melded as if we were one. It seemed that time went away. We were still dancing when Robert Sandler walked up to us and we stopped. Both Mary and I had known him well from the good old days. He said hello to her and then shook my hand. I'm going now, Hugh. I had thought about staying for a few days, but there's no reason to stay any longer. I think I'll scrounge a last-minute ticket and fly out tonight or tomorrow morning. Sydney has already gone. Good luck, Robert. I wish you well. He looked backward and I could see Gail watching us. I don't need to ask, but take good care of her, okay? As always. When he walked away, Gail turned her back on us and walked in the opposite direction. We danced every dance throughout the night. We never sat one out, although we broke twice for drinks and bathroom breaks. No one came up to ask her to dance, but I wouldn't have let her go if they had done. If this was the only night I'd ever have, I would use it to store up memories that would have to hold me for the rest of my life. It was close to midnight. You know it's coming up on that time. Are you going to be able to do it? It's only a kiss. Probably, but you scare me. A big, strong man like you, scared? No one in my life ever hurt me like you did. I tried to kill myself with alcohol that week. If I hadn't been a coward, I'd have used a gun. I know. Why do you think I ran for 2 years? Why did you do it, Mary? That's what I've never understood. I thought we were happy. Was it revenge? For Elaine and the others? She looked up at me and tears were in her eyes. Not now, Hugh. Just give me the rest of this night. Then, if you still want to know, I'll tell you everything. Then they raised and lowered the lights and the DJ was saying, let's count it down. 15, 14, 13, and finally, Happy New Year. Then she was in my arms, and it felt like we were trying to crawl inside each other. It was the best feeling I'd ever experienced, and the worst. She pulled her lips back. Happy New Year, Hugh, my love. I wanted to say something, but as I lifted my gaze, I saw Gail standing alone in a crowd of partiers. Don't go away, Mary. I made another promise. I made my way to Gail. She stood with an open bottle of champagne in one hand. She had given up drinking out of Paloma champagne flutes and was chugging straight from the bottle. May I have a kiss? You promised. You have a woman, Hugh. You don't need to do this. You're my friend, Gail. I'd like to start the new year off right. She came into my arms. I tasted the champagne and what might have been the salt of tears on her lips. Happy New Year, Gail. It will never be happy again, Hugh. Now go back to Mary. I'm going to look around, find somebody cute to F, and get out of here. When I returned to Mary, she molded herself against me and said, I feel so sorry for her. She's still in love with him. I know. Now, where were we? For a few minutes we made out like teenagers in the backseat of a car at the drive-in. Then it was 1 a.m. and people were drifting out, although the party went on. What now? Could we go back to your place, your swinging bachelor pad? I don't know. I'm not sure there's any point, or if I can even get it up. She pushed her hip against me and felt my hardness. Then what's that? I should have said, keep it up. I've been having a few problems in that area recently. Now I'm feeling ready bad, Hugh. Was that me? It must not have been a consistent problem, or little Miss SL wouldn't have been so passionate in your defense. She had a crush on you. Did you know that? You were so wrong. Oh, not one of those schoolgirl crushes. She was too much of a SL for that, but she had that older man thing going on. Anyway, it wasn't a problem with her. So I didn't completely destroy you. You came close enough, Mary, and you destroyed us. She stood back and looked at me, holding my gaze without flinching. Take me back to your place, and I'll answer your questions. I don't know that you'll want me afterwards, but I'll answer your questions. I wasn't sure if I wanted those answers, but I had to have them. It felt like we were walking into my off-campus apartment in Gainesville that first time nearly 40 years before. I held the door open and let her walk in ahead of me. She looked over the one-bedroom third-floor condo, the combination kitchen/dining room, bathroom with a sunken bath and terrace balcony. She just looked at me and I couldn't help saying, not exactly our happy home, is it? But it's all I need now. She reached out to take my hand. Where's your bedroom? I don't even know if I want to do this, Mary. What good is it going to do? Can we just sit on the bed and talk? I took her hand, leading her to the bedroom where dozens of women were with for me over the past 3 years. I felt like we were bashful college students again. We sat together and she placed my hand on her left chest. It still made a nice, soft handful. Suddenly, I saw the ghost of Richard Kelly sitting on the other side of her. He was smiling at her, and she was looking up at him with love in her eyes. I pulled my hand away and lurched to my feet. I can't do this, Mary. I can't. She pulled me down and pushed me back at the same time with surprising strength. I was off balance and fell backward. I reached down to remove her hand, but didn't have the strength. Then she had it out and said almost angrily, "Don't think about him, Hugh. He's not here. I am. I'm not Mary. I'm just some horny co-ed you brought home from a party. I want you." I knew what she was doing. Then I rolled her over onto her back. I probably was hurting her, but at that moment I didn't care. I knew who she was, but, with some split view of reality, at the same time, she was just a half-drunk piece of that I'd talked into my room. Whether she had a good time or not didn't really matter. I don't know how long after, but I became aware that I was still dressed in shirt and tie, and my pants were down around my knees. She lay next to me, still wearing her blouse and shoes. She rolled her head back toward me, looking at me with no expression on that beautiful face. Then a slight smile flickered on her lips as she said, "Now that does remind me of the old days. Except that back then, I was F you. You just RP me." She grinned. "Oh, police, you can't RP the willing, and you were very willing." I took a deep breath and slid a little way away from her. "Thank you, Mary. That was great. But it doesn't solve the problem, does it?" She rolled over and put her hand on the side of my face. "I said I'd answer your questions, Hugh, even if you never want to touch me again. I'll tell you the truth. What do you want to know?" I looked into her eyes, and it seemed like the Mary the first knew had come back, at least for a little while. Was it because of what I did? Was it revenge for Elaine and the others? No. She kissed me gently on the lips. "I knew about you before Elaine. People saw you. You've not that great a philanderer. You forget, I had my own money. When I heard stories, I hired a private detective. He did bug you. I heard you with the waitress from Hooters with Elaine and the woman from Channel 4. She smiled at me. I was angry at you, but, honestly, it was funny at the same time. You were like a little boy whose mother has told him he can't cross the street, so he goes right up to the street corner, puts a foot out, but always runs back to the safety of the sidewalk. You wanted to F them, and you went through all the motions, did all the right things, but you couldn't quite get up the nerve to cross. Jesus, that makes me feel as masculine as hell." She shook her head a little, as if she couldn't believe her ears. "I was supposed to feel bad that you loved me too much to seal the deal, when you could have had all 3 of them and plenty of others. I'm not stupid. Gail and others at the bank have told me over the years about the offers some women put out. After a while, I realized you were never going to go all the way. It was just a matter of waiting for your midlife crisis to pass, and it did. Then why?" She raised herself on one elbow to look down on me, and her tears glistened in the glow from the streetlights outside. "Because I was the SL tramp who you thought I was, Hugh. That's what it boils down to. I betrayed you and your love and 36 years of marriage to F a younger man. It's more complicated than that, but really, that's what it boils down to. That's why I couldn't look you in the eye. But, Jesus, tons of guys hit on you over the years. Some good-looking, really smooth types hit on you, because I saw some of them. Why did you give up everything for him?" She lowered her eyes, and I remembered the way Peter had said she'd been around him and Richard Kelly. What the hell was his secret? He was different. Oh heck, you're not going to tell me he had a foot-long D, are you? Was it just that? She smiled a strange smile, and I felt something freeze deep inside me. That was it. The bastard had something I could never compete against. I'd heard about it, of course. Before Mary, I'd actually F one divorced woman who'd been married to a guy so big that, when we did it, she had to squeeze her thighs together. She liked what I did, but the bastard had ruined her for normal-sized guys. No, baby, he didn't have anything special down there. He was about your. That wasn't it. Then what the hell was it? She stared into my eyes. He was you, Hugh. He was you. I stared back at her, trying to understand. Do you remember when we met? Back at UF? Of course. And you remember David, my fiancé? We'd been together for 3 years, and it was settled that we would marry as soon as he graduated. We even talked about pushing it up a couple of years if we couldn't stand being apart that long. I did love him, or I thought I did. But then I met you. She ran a finger over my lips. I knew what you were doing. Girls aren't that stupid. Wanting to be my friend. Wanting to go see movies? I knew you wanted to get into my pants, but I wasn't worried. I'd been hit on before, but I wanted David. You were no threat, and I liked you. You were funny and a nice guy. You took me to movies and bought pizzas and gave me something to do on Friday nights while David was gone. I figured out pretty soon that, unlike a lot of guys, you weren't going to get ugly or pushy to get between my legs. You were safe, that's the word. She licked her lips and rubbed what looked like a spot of me out of the side of her mouth. But I underestimated you. You got through my defenses. You kept pushing and, little by little, I wanted you to kiss me. Then I wanted you to touch me. Then I wanted to feel. You never stopped, never got discouraged. I realized you were just going to keep on coming until you had me. She bent down to give me a long kiss. You're not a woman, so you have no idea how exciting it is for a woman to realize that a man wants her like that. And I could see that you wanted me that badly, that you weren't going to give up and go away unless I made you. I should have, but by then it was too late. I didn't want you to give up. She pulled away from me and tears began to flow. That's what Richard did, Hugh. He came after me, and he never stopped. He was funny and charming, and I told him to go away, but he kept coming back. She wiped the tears away. I have no excuse, Hugh. I was single when I let you SD me. I was married, happily married, when I let Richard SD me. I made him work for it, but I could have stopped him. I should have, but he was younger, handsome, big and funny. By the time I realized I didn't want to, I knew I was going to cheat on you. We just stared at each other for a while. Finally, she said, I told you. You might not want to be with me again after I told you the truth. So you did fall in love with him? Even though you told Peter and Marlena that you weren't in love, you were. She shook her head. No, you're the only man I've ever loved. It was lust with him. I never thought about making a life with him. I would never have left you. I knew in the back of my mind that when I let him have me the first time, that was probably the end of us. I just knew. You'd take one look at me when I came back from that trip and you'd see it and you'd throw me out, but somehow you didn't. So we met again and we made love, no EF, and I began to tell myself that somehow I'd be able to have him and keep you. I knew deep down that I was lying to myself, but I wanted him too badly. She wet her lips and touched my face as if afraid I was going to run. I know that hurts you, Hugh, but what's the good of lying now? The thing was fantastic. We did it 3 and 4 times a night, and he could just go and go. I couldn't give it up. I guess that makes it all right. She took my face in her hands, so I had to stare into her eyes. At that moment, I wanted to grab her and throw her across the room, but she had said she'd be honest, no matter how much it hurt. I just didn't know anything could hurt that much. You remember I said that he was you. He didn't do anything that you didn't do 20 or 30 years ago. You remember? I was young again, Hugh. There was no way you could compete with him. He was just young for his age. He could do things you couldn't do anymore. In the same way I could never compete with your Brittany. Time just dealt us both a bad hand. I didn't like it, but I understood it. So why did you go to him, and why did you leave him? I went to him because I saw it in your eyes that day you confronted me. You would never have taken me back. If I hadn't run, you'd have divorced me anyway, refused to see or talk to me. I knew you better than you knew yourself. Like I said, I'd have had to watch you hating me for weeks or months, and I couldn't do that. She took a deep breath and then lay her head against my chest. Richard still had this fantasy that we could make a new life together. I don't think he ever loved me. I think he really did still love his wife, but he'd committed himself to us, put his job on the line, left his wife. I knew we wouldn't stay together, but I didn't have anywhere else to go. I couldn't go to the kids and tell them I'd been cheating on their beloved father for 6 months. I'd have lost everything. That's why he was such in a hole when Peter came to visit me that day. He was putting his mark on me, saying that I belonged to him, not to you anymore. I was so embarrassed I couldn't say anything. When we were alone, I told him we'd never be together. He had humiliated me in front of my son. He talked me into staying with him a few more months because I didn't have anywhere else to go, but we were through. She sat up in bed. That's the whole ugly story, Hugh. I said you wouldn't want me when I was through. You probably hate me more than you did when you didn't know it all, but you deserve the truth. She got up, turned on the light, and dressed. She pulled out her cell and called a cab, then stood at the bedroom door and flicked the light off. She stood outlined in the moonlight. I'm sorry, Hugh. You will never know how sorry, but I promised I would leave you alone, and I'll keep that promise. Goodbye. I lay in the moonlight for a long time. A week and a half later, I showed up at McDaniel's corporate headquarters and asked if Miss Meadows was there. It was 11:30 a.m. The receptionist looked at me oddly and said, I'm sorry, we don't have a Miss Meadows working here. She would have been a new transfer, just in from your San Francisco office a few months ago, I believe. She spent a couple of minutes looking at the computer console on her desk, then picked up the phone. Nancy, do we have anybody named Meadows working here? This gentleman says she would have been a recent transfer in. A minute later, she looked up at me and said, I'm sorry, sir. Are you sure she transferred into this office? I guess I was mistaken. She has a habit of jumping around. God only knows where in the world she is today. How about standing right behind you? I turned. I just assumed that I'd run off again. I'm through running, Hugh. Then why don't they have a record of you working here? Because Mary Meadows doesn't work here. Mary Davidson does. I thought Mary Davidson was gone. It's the name they've always known me by here, and it is my name, unless you have any objection. No. Why are you here, Hugh? I didn't think I'd see you again. I got hungry. She had given me a cold stare, which turned curious. It's close to lunchtime. I thought I'd grab a bite at Benny's, one of their lighter deals, maybe steak tips and rice. Would you like to go have a bite? Just dinner? Unless they let you order a drink with your dinner around here. I seem to remember they were pretty loose about that kind of thing. I've got some work I have to finish. All right, another day. But nothing I can't finish this afternoon. Stell, tell Miriam I'm taking a long lunch. Stell gave us a look but said, I will, Mrs. Davidson. Enjoy. The next night we went out to a formal dinner at Benny's with Percy, his significant other, Bobby, and Chauvin. The four of them sent a lot of looks back and forth to each other, but the night went fairly smoothly. I dropped her off at her apartment. Thank you, Hugh. It was my pleasure. Thank you anyway. I didn't kiss her goodnight. She showed up at my office on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. I looked at my watch and said, it's too late for lunch and too early for dinner. She handed me a sealed envelope. You never asked that night. I know you've been with other women, and I've been with other men besides Richard. I hadn't been with anybody in nearly a year before that night. I've been having myself tested every 6 months. I wanted you to know I was clean. If I had HIV or anything serious, it would have shown by now. The proof is in that envelope. Then, have you been tested? I've tried to be careful. I use C most of the time, but I knew there was a danger. So, yeah, I've had myself tested every 3 months. I seemed to be in the clear. We stared at each other. I had this insane impulse to laugh. What in the world were two people within spitting distance of their senior years doing getting tested like teenagers? That hadn't been our world, but the world had changed. Are you going to keep on being tested? No, I don't intend to be with any other man. It's fun, but it's too depressing. I think I'm going to take up knitting. When I didn't say anything, she stared at me. And you? It's fun, but I've kind of lost my appetite. I think I'll just rent PR. She turned and walked out. She did have a great ass. In late January, we went with Bobby and Chauvin to a touring production of a Broadway show, following it up with drinks and some dancing at Pelican's. It was near 2 a.m. when I got close to my place. It's so late and I'm about to collapse, Hugh. Could I sack out at your place? I promise I won't attack your virtue. Is that a promise that you're going to keep? You're big enough that I think you could defend yourself if I tried to molest you. She woke up in my arms the next morning. What are you doing? She asked sleepily. Just watching you. After a moment, her head dropped to my lap. Would you throw me out of bed if I tried to you? Only one way to find out. I didn't throw her out of bed. We kept seeing each other, dating without calling it that. Sometimes she stayed over, and sometimes she didn't. Once in a while, I'd get questions from Gail or other friends. We were married for 36 years. Why shouldn't we go out for drinks or get some lunch? One Tuesday in early March, she showed up at my door at 7 p.m. It was already dark, shadows encroaching where the street lights ended. She rang the doorbell 4 times before I finally staggered to the door. Hugh? I thought we were. I stared at her. Hugh. I thought I could do this, but I was wrong. I closed the door and made it as far as the couch before I gave it up as a bad idea and the world went away. She came to my office just before closing the next day. She was inside the door before my secretary could stop her. I just looked at her. I didn't think you'd let me in if I came to your condo. What happened? We just stared at each other for a long time. I had a dream. More silence. I was in the hotel room watching you and him, watching him push it into you, and I could read it in your eyes, how much you loved it. More silence. None of it was real. I never saw Gail's videos, but it was real. It was the way it would have been. I thought I could get past it. I thought it was the past, but it isn't, and it never will be. He'll always be there. We stared at each other, and it was one of those rare moments in life when words really aren't necessary. I saw the hurt in her eyes, but I couldn't help what I was feeling. I couldn't make myself, by force of will, get past what she had done. She turned around and walked out. I had wanted to drink myself unconscious when I got back to my condo that evening, but I finally put the bottle of brandy down and put the top back on. I stood in my kitchen/dining room staring at my image in the mirror. The bottle had never been a good answer to my problems. The pain never went away. It was just suppressed for a little while, but it was still there when I sobered up. What the hell was I going to do? I had spent 3 years pretending I was over Mary. I had a lot of women. Young women, older women, blondes, brunettes, and a few redheads. I was still in pretty good shape for my age. I had money, was successful professionally, and I could a lot more women before I died. But what was the point? I was looking at 60. What the F did I have left to prove? I would never be any more successful than I was today. I would never be much more rich than I was today. I continued working because work was my life. It was the reason I woke up every morning. I could retire, walk away, and never work another day in my life, then die slowly of boredom or pick up some disease or dehabit. I hated golf. I had never played cards. How many goddamn times can you wake up on a beach and watch the sun rise over the water? I could look for a good, kind, and caring woman. Assuming I found one, I could go through the rituals of courtship, marry again, sleep beside and wake with her, pretend that she fulfills me and know every second that I was playing a part, the happy husband. The only thing I could look forward to was watching my children and grandchildren grow older and live vicariously through their lives. I'd be happy, or as happy as you can be living life secondhand through your children. The hecking bee. She had been the only woman I'd ever really wanted. I had wanted to F others, but she was the only one I wanted to live and die next to. I couldn't stop loving her, but I couldn't live with her. I awoke to the faint glow of the moonlight lending a silvery haze to the night. There was a full, fat moon sitting in the window. I was startled for a moment, but then I recognized the shape under the sheet next to me without seeing her face. Her hair gave her away. "What are you doing here? You know I could have you arrested?" You'd be surprised what Gail can do if you ask her for a favor. I wouldn't be surprised at anything you could do with $50 million. She sat up in bed, the sheet dropping away from her. "You need to leave, Mary." She lowered her eyes. "I'll put on some clothes. I brought pajamas. I didn't come here to seduce you." I sat up in bed. I'd always slept nude. It had never bothered me until tonight. "Do you think you could request a transfer again? I mean, you've moved around so much the past 3 years. One more move wouldn't hurt. I know they have a great office in Atlanta or New Orleans. That would be a great place to live and work." Her eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "I've just moved back, Hugh. Is having me around so distasteful that you want me to move out to give you some space?" "Not necessarily. It occurs to me that Gail has a branch office in Charlotte that covers the Mid-Atlantic region. The kids are gone. I've grown moss here, been here too long. Maybe that's what we both need. I need new surroundings, new coworkers, a new city, while you need a chance to get back into your old life without me here." "You make it sound so reasonable." A tear dropped. There's no chance for us. None at all? I can't see it, baby. Don't do this, Hugh. Please don't do this. I reached out and took her hand in mine. I can't not do this, baby. I can't be in the same city with you. I can't see you, know you're alive and not be with you, but I can't be with you. It hurts too much. She pulled her hand out of mine and lowered her head to my lap, then lower. She rested her face on my knee and wrapped her arms around my legs. Her tears wet my skin. Please, Hugh, I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your loyalty and your love. Maybe I don't deserve another chance, but give me one. I'll do anything. I'll keep my own apartment. You can have other women. Just don't make me watch, and if you want, you can put a monitor on me. You can have me followed. Anything to prove that there won't be any other men. She rubbed her face back and forth on my leg. I still have urges, but I'll use AV if you can't make yourself love me. We don't have to have it if that makes you uncomfortable. She tightened her grip on my legs, as if afraid I was going to rise up and throw her over. I've lived without you for 3 years, Hugh. When I was with other men, it wasn't any different than using AV. As much as you love me, I love you that much and more. She released my legs and raised her eyes to me. Let me stay in your life, Hugh. Don't cast me out. If you ever loved me, don't cast me out. We stared at each other until I patted the pillow at my side. She slid up to lay beside me, and that's how we fell asleep. She went back to her place in the morning. We didn't see each other for a couple of days, but she showed up one evening at 7 p.m. with a chicken and onion rice casserole, which she knew I loved. She brought pajamas and spent the night. We got together 2 or 3 nights a week. Sometimes we went out, and sometimes we stayed in. Unless I'd had a bad dream, we slept in the same bed, chastely. A month went by, and we had gone out to see the horror/suspense flick. We went to the last showing. It was a Friday, and neither of us had to work the next day. I poured us a couple of brandies while she slipped into pajamas and curled up on the couch in the den next to me. As I sat beside her, I handed her a goblet with dark liquid in it and a manila envelope. She gave me a look. I want you to have your own copy. She took a sip, then put the drink aside and opened the envelope. She took out the folded paper and looked it over. Is this what I think it is? I had to buy new adjoining plots in Evergreen Cemetery. The ones we had, well, I got pissed and sold them while we were apart. I never thought I would ever want to be near you, living or dead. And now? I told you once that I would never leave you, and that I'd do my best to outlive you, so I wouldn't leave you by dying on you. Tears welled. I will never leave you, Mary, living or dead. You're stuck with me. We spent the night naked in bed together. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel the presence of any ghosts in the darkness. There are still times when I want it to be like it was. I awake next to her, and, in the early fog of half-consciousness, I feel the warmth of her body. For a little while, there is no Richard Kelly, no 3-year gap in our lives, no pain, but then I awake fully and the memories rush in. Then I realize it will never be like it was. There is that moment of incredible loss and pain, like a sharp stabbing pain in the heart, but it goes away. She rolls over next to me, and she is still Mary. I did what I did, and she did what she did. But we are still together here and now in the year of our Lord 2010. That's pretty much the end of our story. For now, we are officially senior citizens, having hit the 60 mark. Although when I join her in the shower and the water runs down the smooth flesh of her back, I have a hard time believing it. The calendar doesn't lie, but as the poet said long ago, if we cannot make the sun stand still in the turning of the days, we can make him run like hell to catch up with us, or something like that. I check on Richard Kelly every now and again. Not that I am worried about Mary. I trust her once again, but he nearly destroyed my life. While I still don't plan to ever cross the line and become someone I've never been, if he was to approach her again. However, from everything I can tell, he has made his peace with his wife. They have no children, and I have no concept of what it would be like to approach late middle age or senior years with no children or grandchildren to cushion the passing of the years. It must be lonely. Peter and Marlena are happy. Peter continues mucking around in the brains of strangers, and his professional reputation grows. Marlena works as an increasingly highly paid RN. Austin grows increasingly brilliant and cuter than should be allowed by law. He is a young first grader in a highly expensive private school. I've set up a trust fund for his college education. As long as he attends the University of Florida, go Gators. Nicole has had 3 surgeries in less than a year on her left arm, leg and, unexpectedly, her hip. She needs 2 more, so it will probably be closer to 2 years than the one Walensky predicted, but she gets around on crutches or a walker. Her publisher has allowed her to work out of her home and, as Walensky predicted, she is 100% the girl I knew. She has edited 2 bestsellers since her recovery, working from home. Simon is Simon and Calabria. Well, all I can say is that the name has grown on me. Even at this young age, I can tell that one day she will be the heartbreaker her grandmother was so long ago. I have begun the process of setting up a trust fund for her college education. Simon pushed for Harvard, but I put my foot down. No grandchild of mine will ever go to Harvard. Now Yale? That's a different story. I think sometimes at work of those 3 years, of the people who entered or passed through my life. They say you do a lot more of that as you get older. Not that I'm old, but Percy is still with the same boyfriend. They seem happy. Percy can still take anyone in the team-building retreat arm wrestling championships, except Bobby. Bobby and Chauvin are together, and they seem happy. Especially so since the day that Bobby came in passing around cigars to celebrate their adoption of a 3-day-old boy, the son of a friend's 15-year-old daughter. Coffee has shown up at several company get-togethers with the attorney, Greg, in tow, and I'm pretty sure she isn't seeing anyone else. They stick close to each other, and, while it's ancient history for us, Mary reminds me that Coffee is in that period of time when her biological clock is ticking ominously and she may be getting ready to do something about it. Gail is still Gail. She works harder than any of us and takes her boy toys home to F most weekends. She hasn't made any serious connections. She tells me she's happy, but there are times when I'll stick my head in the door and I see her looking at the portrait of her grandfather, rubbing her lower lip in that gesture of hers, when I wonder if she is thinking of Los Angeles and the man who walked away from her to make a new life there. I tell myself, because I do love her like a niece, that she is still young. There is still the possibility of a happy ending. If it can happen to me, it could happen to her, but even if I wanted to meddle, I won't. It's her life. In idle moments, I wonder whatever happened to the hooker, Renee, and the DEA man who had given up everything to be with her as she died. Is she still alive? Did he ever go back to his wife or his job? Was Kevin able to forget that his amnesiac wife was still alive with another man and that man's child? Rob, the boy he's raising, would be 14. Talk about a challenge, raising a bruised 14-year-old in today's world. I wish him luck. I wonder if the beautiful redhead is still together with her scarred lover. I hope so. There are people you meet that you just like, for no reason, and those were 2 like that. I hope she continues to fondle those scars lovingly for many years to come. I see Walensky on the television news once in a while, still working medical miracles, saving lives. He's been married and divorced in one 6-month period. Evidently, he's a better physician than husband. He married and divorced one of the most beautiful women in the world, and on the rebound, he's dating one of the wealthiest women in the world. He'll be all right. Brittany is still Brittany. It's hard to believe she's looking at 30. I will really feel ancient when she turns the big 3-0. I see her sometimes at bank functions and social events. She's become a good friend of Gail's. When she sees me, she approaches me with that hip-swinging, chest-bouncing gait that reminds me of nights past. Her smile tells me she remembers them too. Of course, with that innate wife radar that spouses possess, before we can spend too long together, Mary is between us, friendly and charming as always, but making sure that Brittany gets the subliminal message of whose property I am now. I'm back in bed beside Mary. She buries her head against my chest. The Stones said it long ago. Sometimes you can't get what you want. What I want I'll never have again, but if you're lucky, sometimes you can get what you need. What I have here is what I need. I know there are those who know our story that wonder, but don't have the balls to ask how I could take her back. The answer is simple. I love the bitch.